Just like the Gokai gun, the Gokai Saber has no moving parts to it, except for the Ranger key tumbler, which obviously I'll discuss later, and the trigger, which I'll be going over later as well. Is the Gokaiger, the Red Pirates Gang logo right there. And here's the interesting thing, not one but two battery compartments, which takes 3 AAA batteries that you have to provide. It's interesting for me though is, not one battery compartment but 2 battery compartments, single battery here and 2 batteries here. My guess would be that they needed to compensate somehow for the extra LED feature that they had built in that just consumed more power than 2 could provide. So, nothing special, but certainly worth writing about, I suppose. I don't know. I wrote about it. The blade section is PVC. It's thin, flexible, and the rest of it is ABS. And that's it. Also included in the Gokai Saber set is Ranger Key number 4, Gokai Yellow, who, for those of you playing at home, is a female. Actually, the first female Ranger Key that I've gotten so far. All Ranger Keys, the mold shapes, whatever, are very androgynous looking, which means that for female characters, you're not going to have the widened hips or a larger bust. The only modification you might see, if it's in the original Ranger costume, is in this case Gokai Yellow has kind of sort of skirt looking thing. So that's about it. Otherwise, arms and head are made of PVC, and the rest is made of ABS. The arms don't really ratchet, but they do kind of snap into every 45 degrees, and then to complete it, that is the Ranger Key for Gokai Yellow. So why would they include this in the set? On-off switch is here. Pull the trigger once, you get this. Pull it again, you get purple. Is meant to, there have been a number of Legend Sentai that were actually purple. Not many, but there were a few. But primarily purple is supposed to represent black, because what does a black look like? Let me think. Purple! There's also green. And yes, there were also a couple of white Rangers. And that's it. Oh yeah, by the way, speaker is right there. So what happens if you hold down the trigger? Now here's something interesting. You hold it down to have him say this. But you actually have to let go in order to make it sound off. Watch carefully. You see, it's not when I'm pushing down, it's when I let go that it goes off. So, that's kind of interesting. Anyways, yeah. Simple electronic sound. There's only one, obviously I've demonstrated now, there's only one sound effect for actual sword clashing. And that's it. Unless you include Ranger keys. That's what this is for. It actually will snap into position, and there is once more a little arrow to let you know which way to turn. And it'll do that every time I squeeze the trigger, as long as there's a Ranger key in place. Now I'm pretty sure you've noticed at this point that whenever the final wave is initiated, you see that you get not only the white LED, actually I'm not kind of sure what kind of light is in there. It must be an LED because it's cheap and it's... Anyways, yeah, there's a white LED and then the yellow LED. Well, the Gokai Saber is actually pretty similar to the, Henshin Kitai Mobai Rats, in that it uniquely identifies Ranger keys. So, I just so happen to have a different Ranger key. Gokai Blue's Ranger key. Oops. Watch what happens to the coloring both when I put it in and when I activate the final wave. So here's the first one. So there's that. The Gokai Saber uniquely identifies Ranger keys. It doesn't, it doesn't say Harikenga Jiyaku. It doesn't say that, but it definitely does change color when specific types of Ranger keys are in there. And that is it for the electronic features of the Gokai Saber. With a little bit of diligence and practice, you actually can synchronize for the Gokai Scramble finishing attack. It took me 8 minutes worth of tries to get that straight. But the good news is, it's so cool when you finally figure it out. It's fun. Wow, I just finished rewatching a 23-minute conclusion that I just finished recording. That is ridiculous. So I'm going to try and cut this down a bit. Yeah, there were important things that I said in it, but it took way too long for me to say all of it. That was ridiculous. I mean, the first thing that I said was I spent 2 months just sitting on this toy doing absolutely nothing with it just because I was depressed and because I actually opened it up when I didn't have time, and then my original opinions aren't as fresh and as raw as they usually are when it's just been opened up, and it was just kind of blah 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 blah. So that didn't really work. It's absolutely true, but just did I really have to say it? Not really. And it took me 3 minutes to say all of that, which is ridiculous. And I also said something to the effect of the visual appearance of the Gokai Saber is really close to the Gokai Gun. Well, no it is, because, well, they're from the same toy line, and they're supposed to look like they're from the same series, So, yeah, that was kind of a stupid thing for me to say. The bottom line is that this is a great little toy version of a Cutlass Saber. It really does work, and it's quite nice. It's so nice that my hands actually fit completely in it. My fingers fit quite nicely in here, adult-sized collector fingers. The only problem with it that I have, actually, is that the brand, the Gokaiger brand, actually pushes up against my knuckles if I squeeze down too hard on the grip. So, otherwise, I've got no problem with this toy whatsoever. It just works so nicely. As a matter of fact, the only thing that I can really complain about is I was surprised at not necessarily how thin the blade was, but how thick everything else is. I mean, look at that. Look how thin the blade is, and then, I mean, yeah, you do have to have that black plastic in there so that it'll cover up the Ranger key and the Ranger key tumbler. You have to have that covered up. That kind of makes sense. But the problem is, why wouldn't you compensate it by having the thickness of the blade be, well, thicker? I mean, that's certainly something that's been done in the past with Super Sentai toys. I mean, there was the ABBA laser in 2003, which, went from sword to gun, which is actually the opposite of what I just transformed. I actually had a nice transformation process to it. Transformation? What does that have to do with anything? I don't know. It's getting late. But what I liked about it was the thickness of the blade. Obviously, it's a toy. You could actually poke somebody's eye out with this thing. On the other hand, you might actually club somebody to death if you use the Baku laser on them. I mean, big difference. But look at the size of that thing. That was really nice. I mean, yeah, it's still made of PVC, but, the thickness of it ensured that nothing would get sliced. And, nice rounded edge here, blah, 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 blah. And again, the same thing happened in 2009 with the Shinken Maru. It was PVC blade, but it was actually a little bit thicker. It's actually slightly thicker than it is on the Gokai Saber. On the other hand, for the 30th anniversary series, Gokai Sentai Gokaiger, you had the really thin blade that had to be able to fit inside of the Survey Buster. It was really thin PVC, and it looked kind of ugly, and obviously the blade was really thin on the toy compared to how it was in the show. But it made sense for the blade to be thin like that. On the other hand, in 2007, with Juken Sentai Gokaiger, you had the Geki Saber. Is that right? Geki Saber? Yeah. Where it's actually written into the show that the blades were intentionally floppy. I don't know if that was a design decision or whatnot. I got the hiccups. But on the toy, it actually led to some deformations in the molding process for the blade. So, that was a little bit of a problem, and it didn't make a lot of sense why it is that would be so thin, considering that the other blades had been, could be thicker and were still able to flex. So that was actually something that, it kind of puzzled me. Why would the blade be so thin? It's not the length, and or maybe it is. I mean, maybe there is some sort of toy regulation I don't know about from Japan. Like the length of the blade would determine how thick it needed to be. But you would think that it would be a little thicker to kind of cover up the fact that this section here is so wide. That was something that I had a bit of a problem with. There's something else that I want to bring up really quick that I didn't have an opportunity to illustrate as clearly when I was reviewing the Gokai gun. I just kind of briefly mentioned it, but I didn't actually have the forethought to actually bring it up and really get into the detail of it. The Ava laser, again, is actually a good example of this. This is the Super Sentai Standard. By the way, I actually like this design. This is pretty cool because, in case you haven't noticed, it's a dinosaur's head. Actually, it kind of looks like a dragon's head. A blast dragon's head. Something like that. Anyways, this is the standard for Super Sentai in that it's a blaster. This is the standard sidearm that all of the Ava Ranger have. It's a blaster that transforms into a sword. Sometimes they would transform into a dagger or something like that. This is more or less the standard of Super Sentai. There have, however, been more than a few series where the primary sidearm was a blade, was a sword or maybe a dagger of some kind. There was the Juoken from Gao Ranger was another example of this. So the primary sidearm was just a sword or a dagger or a blade of some kind, and then the secondary customized Ranger weapons were, whatever they were. And off the top of my head, the only series I can think of where the primary standard sidearm was, well, a sidearm was in Gokaiger, in 2010. And even then, they had a little customized, you could stick the header on there and that was it. But anyways, with Gokaiger, they had a blaster as their primary weapon, and then their customized personal weapons were all weapons that had blades on them, or spikes, or whatever you want. There were a lot of exceptions to Gokaiger. Wow, just thinking about Gokaiger makes me go numb. That show was terrible. Ugh. But unless they did it in some of the earlier series, and shame on me for not researching ahead of time, I think that Gokaiger is the first Super Sentai to have both a sword and a gun, not only as the sidearms, but designed as separate toys that cannot interact with each other than doing that. That's pretty much the only way that they interact with each other. And then there's also that thing that I did earlier, which is badass, by the way. So Gokaiger is a bit of an exception in that regard. And that was something that I brought up in regards to the Gokai gun, in that, it was a simplified toy that didn't transform. Well, the same thing kind of applies to the Gokai Saber. It is, a simplified version of a cutlass. Of course, what else is a cutlass but simple? Anyways, the point I'm trying to make is that sometimes I actually bought a sidearm that was just a sword, but I actually don't have a problem with having both a gun and a sword that cannot interact with each other beyond the unifying gimmick, mind you, I don't have a problem with the Gokai Saber just being as a standalone. Buying it separately helps to keep the cost down. But I suppose it's the fact that these work together so well with each other, aside from the fact that they were used by pirates in the 17th, 18th, sometimes even 19th century. Well, I don't know about flintlock pistols, but still, you can use one toy over the other. But clearly, as I mentioned in the Gokai Gun review, these are meant to be used together. I mean, they don't interact with each other other than Ranger keys. But, you know, you're very much meant to hold one in one hand and the other in the other hand. Actually, you're supposed to do it this way. I can't shoot left-handed, but you're supposed to be able to use... Anyways, yeah, these definitely go well together, and I highly recommend that you pick these up. You know, whether separately or together. I mean, they are great little toys by themselves, but to have them together is just... it just feels right. I blanked for a moment there. I'm still thinking about Gokaiger. Ugh. Yeah, having the Gokai Saber uniquely recognize Ranger keys, that's not a problem. I like that. That's good. And honestly, I didn't have anything wrong with that not being available in the Gokai Gun because, well, it happened here. So, you know, they did it at least once. If the Gokai Saber had not had identifying ability but had still had LEDs, that would not have been a problem with me either. So that was just a nice little bonus to have. So Gokai Saber, as much as with the Gokai Gun, very much love it. Go get one. It's great. There's one other little thing that's been bugging me for several months now, and people have been asking me about this and commenting to me about this, and you know what? They're absolutely right. Why is it that Gokai Blue was not included with this set? Having Gokai Yellow makes sense because Gokai Yellow and Gokai Blue are kind of the sword masters of the series. So why is it that, although, you know, Gokai Blue is obviously the better sword master because he can wield 5 swords at one time. Ridiculous as that sounds. But then, why is it that he's included in the Gokai Gun toy? I don't get that, because there's no relation between them whatsoever. I mean, he uses 2 swords. You know, why is he included with the Gokai Gun set? I don't get that. Why wasn't it Gokai Green or Gokai Pink that was included in this set? You know, have Blue with Gokai Saber, and then have Gokai Green or Pink with this set. I don't know. I just don't get that. But oh well. Hey, I've got them. And finally, before I close this video out, I would like to pass my special thanks and appreciation out to YouTube user StarKiller391, who generously gifted me with this Gokai Saber. He emailed me and said, Ava, I love the way you do your video reviews, and I love the way you explain everything, and I like how you take an extended amount of time to explain all these things. Here's a Gokai Saber for you. Enjoy it, and I hope that you make a great video review out of it. And so to StarKiller1, I would say, wow. One of my fans gave me a toy hoping that I would review it, and review it well. Well, I certainly hope I've lived up to your standards, StarKiller391. But just, wow, thank you. You helped me in finding one of these impossible-to-find toys. I mean, I pre-ordered this thing in January 2011, and here it is August 2011, and it still hasn't come in. So, yeah, StarKiller391, you saved me from a great burden there, so thank you very much, man. I really appreciate what you did for me.